Today, we're talking with journalist and scholar KJ No. KJ is a peace activist also. He's an organizer with the organization Pivot to Peace. He's a frequent contributor to Counterpunch and Dissident Voice. KJ No, welcome back.
Thank you. Pleasure to be with you.
KJ, this article in the New York Times that really jumped out at anyone who could possibly have taken a look at it, very dramatic, and in a way seemingly novel because it's about a system that existed for decades, but the US media has never covered it at all that I can tell, the mainstream media. So it seemed like a bombshell, like a revelation. Tens of thousands of women basically conscripted as sex slaves, not by the Japanese government, which we know all too well about during World War II in the era of colonial domination of South Korea or all of Korea by Japan. But this was the Pentagon. This was the US military and the government it created, a puppet military dictatorship in South Korea after World War II. Okay, seemed like a revelation, but I'm reading your articles from Counterpunch. You wrote about the same story in 2015, so it's not a secret. Obviously, the people in Korea know about it. One, why no coverage before, and why is this story coming to the New York Times in such a prominent way now?
Well, Brian, we know that militaries are violent. And the reason why this story has been covered so much is that it undermines two foundational myths. One is that the US is a beneficial presence in other countries. And secondly, it undermines the story of South Korea's development itself. What I mean by that is, as I said, militaries are violent. They're violent institutions, and foreign militaries, that is to say, imperial militaries, are even more violent. They're violent and misogynistic. They're built on misogyny, on hatred of women. And when the U.S. established itself in Korea, or rather when the U.S. first came to Korea, it came with, just this tremendous metaphor of sexual conquest. When the U.S. first colonized South Korea, and this was started in 1882, it was shot through with this metaphor of sexual conquest and sexual entitlement. Commodore Schufeld, who signed the agreement with Korea in 1882, said that the Pacific is the ocean bride of America, Korea is the bridesmaid. All of this has been incredibly shot through with this metaphor of sexual conquest. And it really has been, since the late 19th century, a kind of master-slave relationship, similar to this notion of a plantation master having access to the bodies of his slaves. And so this kind of international droit de seigneur, this master-slave relationship, then was translated into the specific military occupation. And what they did was, originally South Korea, or Korea itself, was colonized by Japan. And when it was colonized by Japan, the Japanese drafted about 4 million Koreans into slave labor to build its industrial machine. But they also trafficked hundreds of thousands of Korean women into sexual slavery for their frontline troops. This is what we refer to euphemistically as the comfort women system. And it was essentially Japanese military bureaucratic rationalization of gang rape, military gang rape administered to 20 to 50 times a day. And, only 1 out of 4 of these women would survive. When the Japanese left, the South Korean puppet government that was placed in by the United States continued the practices because they had been Japanese collaborators. And so then the South Koreans started to provide comfort women for U.S. troops. And so they would take, starving war orphans, war widows, former comfort women, kidnapped North Korean nurses, and the spouses of political prisoners, and then they would use them for these new comfort brigades. And at the time, the U.S. Labeled them Class 5 military supplies. That is, these are humans that were shipped in like cold beers, and that they would shuffle in half-ton trucks with starving, pathetic women, and then administer them as treats and rewards and perks to occupying U.S. troops. If you read the Stars and Stripes in the 1970s, there's an advertisement which says, "Picture having 3 or 4 of the loveliest creatures God ever created hovering around you, singing, dancing, feeding you, saying you are the greatest. This is the Orient you heard about and came to find." But in a more prosaic level, I think the troops used to refer to them as a cheap yellow FUCKING machines. And essentially, the South Korean government became one big pimp for the US military. And we estimate that in the 1960s, about 20 to 25% of the country's foreign revenue was garnished through prostitution. Over 1 million would serve as prostitutes for US troops. And it became a core part of South Korea's developmental economy. That is to say, there's a myth that says that South Korea developed because they worked hard and they planned well and they, implemented capitalism in this very skillful fashion. That's completely untrue. South Korea is an economic basket case, and it was poorer than North Korea until 1978. But one of the ways in which built capital and developed their economy was through mass prostitution. And the South Korean Ministry for Women and Gender estimates somewhere in the range of 1 out of 5 women between the ages of 16 and 29 were actually prostituted.